My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a detransitioner. Another way to put that would be, I used to believe that I was born in the wrong body, and the adults in my life whom I trusted affirmed my belief, and this caused me lifelong, irreversible harm. I speak to you today as a victim of one of the biggest medical scandals in the history of the United States of America. I speak to you in the hope that you will have the courage to bring the scandal to an end and ensure that other vulnerable teenagers, children, and young adults don't go through what I went through.
Have you noticed how certain behaviors seem to spread like wildfire among teenage girls, from extreme dieting to sudden tics, to a skyrocketing number of girls questioning their gender? Psychologists are calling this social contagion, and some clinical psychologists argue that teen girls are especially vulnerable. So what's going on? Let's break it down. Social contagion is when behaviors, emotions, or beliefs spread rapidly through a group, often unconsciously. Teenagers, especially girls, are highly susceptible because they're biologically wired to seek social approval. Psychologists like Dr. Jordan Peterson and Dr. Jonathan Haidt warn that in the age of social media, these contagions spread faster than ever.
If you're a teenage, then it gets worse for teenage girls, I think, because we also know that teenage girls experience a spike in neuroticism that's attendant on puberty, and that their self-conscious concerns tend to be particularly body-focused. And that's probably a consequence of the fact that females are evaluated more stringently as a consequence of their appearance, particularly when they're young. I mean, men are evaluated on the basis of their performance, let's say, but women tend to be evaluated more on the basis of their appearance. And so you can see that's a perfect storm for young girls because they hit a negative emotion peak at 13. Now they're susceptible to bullying. They're extremely self-conscious about their bodies. And then the entire online world is a place to display for public. It's like the old nightmare that people have about public speaking is being naked on a stage. That's really, in some real sense, what the social media world has done to teenage girls.
We've seen this before. In the 90s and 2000s, when anorexia surged among teen girls, magazines glorified extreme thinness, and girls in friend groups developed eating disorders together. Psychologists called it peer-driven pathology, a contagion of harmful behavior. Studies show girls are 10 times more likely than boys to develop eating disorders, often influenced by peer groups. Then came TikTok tics. Suddenly, doctors were reporting thousands of teen girls with uncontrollable movements and vocal tics. Neurologists found most had no organic cause. Instead, they were mimicking influences with Tourette's. Dr. Susan Bradley, a child psychiatrist, called it a mass sociogenic illness, a modern-day hysteria spread online. Now, we're seeing a similar pattern with gender dysphoria. Historically, it was extremely rare and mostly affected males. But in the last decade, clinics like Tavistock in the UK report a 5,000% increase in teen girls seeking transition. In 2009, they had only 40 referrals, and the majority of those cases were boys. This aligns with what the historical records show. Just 12 years later, they had over 5,000 referrals, and 70% of those were girls. Dr. Lisa Littman coined the term rapid-onset gender dysphoria, where teens, especially girls in friend groups, suddenly identify as trans after social exposure.
Suggestive of friend group onsets or individuals of this nature. I read about early onset gender dysphoria, late onset gender dysphoria, which up until 2012 only consisted of male individuals in the literature. So that was intriguing. I also did a deep dive into the social media world because I wanted to see what kids were communicating to each other on this topic. And I found a very surprising environment where individuals would go online, they would say, I'm lonely, I'm uncomfortable, does that mean I'm trans? And then immediately individuals would jump in and say, oh, absolutely, that means you're trans, you need to transition as soon as possible. And there was these dynamics that reminded me of some of the dynamics around the social contagion of eating disorders. So individuals that were highly praising anybody who was transgender identified, who was transitioning, but a active animosity towards individuals who were not trans identified. So the in-group, out-group dynamic also intrigued me.
Dr. Jordan Peterson and others argue this is another social contagion fueled by online influencers and peer dynamics. Child psychologist Dr. Miriam Grossman warns that teen girls are uniquely vulnerable. They're more likely to internalize trauma, struggle with self-esteem, and seek identity in groups. She argues that affirming gender dysphoria without exploration can be dangerous, especially when it spreads like a trend.
Feelings or beliefs or behaviors spread among a social group. And we know that teen girls are especially vulnerable to social contagions, and they can be, they can be benign. They can be a kind of haircut or a kind of makeup or shoes or what have you. But they can also be serious or dangerous: eating disorders, injurious behavior, suicide attempts. And so now we have a social contagion of gender dysphoria and extreme discomfort with one's sex. And it certainly does occur in groups. We know that, we have groups of kids that are arriving in clinics like Planned Parenthood and other places. They arrive, they're like groups of kids who know each other from school or elsewhere, and they all arrive in the clinic and they all want testosterone. They all want hormones. So you have to understand that these are mostly also kids who have other psychiatric issues, other emotional issues. They are very often on the autism spectrum. They have anxiety, they have depression, they have a history of trauma. They have had difficult lives, and they have been led to believe that their feelings, their anxiety and depression, and they're not fitting in with other kids at school is because they are in the wrong body, and their problems will be solved. Their emotional problems will be cured if they go through this process that is now, in an Orwellian way, called gender affirming care, which actually means that you affirm unreality and you deny biological reality.
Social contagion affects everyone, but teen girls are uniquely vulnerable. Why? First, their brains are rewiring at hyperspeed. The prefrontal cortex, which governs judgment, is not fully developed until the mid-20s. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the emotional center, is in overdrive. This makes them hyper-attuned to social cues and hyper-prone to mirroring them. Research shows they are more influenced by social hierarchies, more likely to adopt group behaviors to fit in, and, thanks to platforms like TikTok, more exposed to viral ideas. Combine that with a mental health crisis, and you have a perfect storm for contagion. This isn't about dismissing real struggles, it's about recognizing patterns. Parents, teachers, and therapists need to ask, is this truly my child's struggle, or is it something they've absorbed from their environment? Because history keeps repeating itself, and our girls deserve better. What do you think? Have you seen social contagion at play? Drop your thoughts below, and if you found this eye-opening, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives.